evening. Welcome to the Capital Committee's first meeting of the year. We've got a nice little packet here for the 23rd of February. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We have a member, Gordon, who is remote. He's out of state, so even he's here. Got a lot of stuff to cover tonight. But I want to start out with Charlie to have a little conversation about capital and what the town wants to do, may want to do, or if we still have to decide what we need to do.
I think it's the latter.
It's the latter.
The last of the three options. So I believe traditionally what we've done here in East Bridgewater is use our free cash to pay for the capital expenditures. Yes? No? I mean, in some cases we borrowed, for longer term
Right.
Projects, and we're gonna need to look at our debt load and see if it's declining enough that we wanna take on new debt. My hope would be long-term is that we would retire the debt and just pay things in cash. But, I'll give you an example of the library roof. That may not be possible at $1.7 million. But what we did last year was we used free cash to balance the operating budget. And what we had a policy agreement with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, and then obviously the vote through the townspeople, was we wanted to be on a glide path that whatever we used in '23, we're only going to use 2/3 of that amount in '24, 1/3 of that amount in '25, and then stop using free cash for the operating budget come fiscal '26 to get out of that hole we were in. It does slowly then free up that free cash for capital expenditures, but it won't be a large amount of free cash available for fiscal '24 for the capital budget. So if we're going to decide to appropriate money, it's either going to be by long-term borrowing or it's going to be by dipping into the capital, stabilization fund for capital projects.
Right, so I think Melanie, I think it was $133,000 was falling off the debt this year,
Yeah, it wasn't a lot.
so,
Which is minuscule.
which we could probably roll that into help somewhere.
Right.
That's what I figured. Okay, great, and then when we figure out how much we have, we can start voting on,
Well, and also you can either, even before you say, make final decisions, you can come up, okay, if we have this much money, we're gonna go this
this,
way.
we'll do that.
And, or, if we're going to say that this project is going to be debt, assume 5% for 20 years, for instance. So 5% of 20 years, you're gonna spend $100,000 the first year on principal and interest. $50,000 principal every year for 20 years. At 5% of $1 million, you're spending $50,000 interest. It will start dropping down, but you might have, let's say, at 133, so you got $1.33 million that you could borrow with
Down payment.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now I'm getting nervous. I'm gonna ask Mr. Haynes to come up.
You got plenty of ink in your pen for your checkbook. Good evening.
Good evening.
You can go up there too.
Yeah.
So before you this evening, we have prepared, I believe all of you have it, there were several requests that the capital capital committee has asked for. We've prepared individual 3 to 5 year infrastructure, facilities, water infrastructure, roadway improvement plans, and equipment plans. Obviously, Public Works encompasses a fairly significant portion of all the services that, in one place or another, we impact pretty much every other department in town with services related to, and the overall, maintenance and repair of the infrastructure of town, whether that be the public ways, our water system, our municipal buildings, our green spaces, all. So you've got big packets in front of you. How do we want to proceed?
Well, I mean, if you've got a PowerPoint, we'd have to dig through the packet. We can kind of go through the packet as we have it.
I have individual sort of PowerPoints that I provided to each other. So do you want to start with the road improvement plan? Do you want to start with the water infrastructure plan, the facilities?
Well, we have the whole thing here. Do you guys want to just watch the PowerPoint and take notes? I think it would be a little easier, and we can
Are we
dig through this.
prepared to? So I submitted PowerPoints to everybody. I don't know if how they were put forward. I don't know.
Right. We won't be doing a PowerPoint tonight.
I don't know how the committee wanted to
So,
work those.
I think we should just approach it as we're going through the packet.
Okay.
Okay, it's easier for all of us. So the first thing we have is a right stander autonomous mower.
Okay, so you want to go item by item? You don't
Yeah,
want, you're not interested in the
Well, when we get to that
plans?
Pat piece, maybe we will, but
Okay. So I don't know what you guys have in front of you, so you'll have to talk to me, because I don't know how it was compiled, the information we gave you.
I think
The
you,
mowers first.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
the
have,
mowers
you have do you have a copy of the request, John? The
Not in that
summary?
format, no.
I mean, that's,
yeah.
it's been what I think.
This is the way we have them in the packet.
I
Is there
think,
a way to share this? Not without, I don't think that, not without losing Gordon, right? Because I could log into that screen, but I think we'd lose the link to Gordon. I'm not,
That's all right, as long as I can hear, and if you share the screen, I can see that.
all right, so the first request we have for consideration is, we are looking at the opportunity, and this is sort of an exciting opportunity. This is something that I'm pretty interested in. We've done some investigation into it. We've actually been now to a demo with a local local vendor who supplies this equipment. But these are, in my opinion, it's the future. So these are essentially robotic autonomous mowers that operate independent of an operator. And we are particularly suited for this type of mower in the sense that we have large, wide open areas that the software program and the unit itself are suited to. Essentially, it's based on GPS coordinates and satellite linking. You identify a perimeter where this mower will work. You hit map it, you identify the perimeter, and you set the mower to go. And it mows within that perimeter that you've established. So in the world that we are certainly moving towards with serious issues with recruitment and maintaining labor and identifying labor in the future, I see these autonomous mowers and autonomous equipment, but these lawnmowers are sort of the first step towards that. Pretty interesting. We would be one of the first communities in the area, I think in the state, probably to have this technology in place. It has, one of the things that when I've talked a lot of times at Finance Committee and at Capitol about, the way these systems work though, they have future operating costs that then have to be maintained in your operating budget. So their software programs
You have
really.
any idea what the future cost would be? on
My
what the
understanding is that
maintenance
right now it'd be about $11,000 a year to maintain the
The software, but
software
what about the
for-
maintenance
for-
on the mower?
maintenance. It's a straight up mower, just like the other mowers we have. It's a 74-inch.
Yeah, but there's the
commercial
technical
walk-on.
part that has
The
to
tech,
receive a
that's
signal.
included in the software,
pay
as
for
I
the
understand
software.
it. So that would be service and support of the software. And I'm not gonna come forward and say this is gonna, eliminate labor. What this is going to allow us to do is with the labor that we have, utilize it better. Because now what we have are 2 or 3 guys that are sitting on, lawnmowers out there mowing. What this would allow would be crews of an individual and an autonomous mower. So while the autonomous mower mowed the majority of, say, of an outfield of a baseball field or whatnot, that individual, the operator, because these things can be essentially operated with an iPad. They're pretty, you know, once that's set and mapped, then that operator would get on another machine and he'd mow all the inside, the infield, do the weed whacking, you know, could prep, you know, the field. And so it's gonna make the labor we have significantly more efficient.
So that's what I was gonna ask you, just, you know, kind of based on one of the pictures that I see here. So I do my programming, and then effectively, I could walk away from that entirely and let
Entirely.
it do its thing.
Correct.
And then I guess the other question would be, it's doing its thing, cutting the outfield grass, and I decide that I wanna take a stroll through the outfield. Does it,
So it has
does it have a capability to?
sensors to
Yep,
stop
it has
us.
technology
Okay.
that it can sense, so if, you know, someone's left a soccer ball in the middle of the field, it's gonna know to stop. Or if it's coming along and it sees an irrigation head that,
Popped
you know,
up.
popped up and it knows to stop. You know, and I think it stops within 4 to 6 feet of that. So again, that's why you still need to have
Somebody there.
an operator in the area, but while they're doing, you know.
Other things,
They're
sure.
doing other things, that you're maximizing that labor. So I think it's, whether it be us or some other community or, you know, a commercial vendor. I've been also talking to a entity in, a company in New Hampshire that's doing this with residential homes, and he has 45 residential accounts. It's a little bit different type of setup, but if you think about it, I think most people are familiar with a Roomba vacuum. It's the same concept. And he has this, but he has maintenance techs who become like service techs, and they go around and they service these units. So there's still labor involved in it, there's still, but you're maximizing the labor you have.
Well, we've come a long way from the town meeting we had where there was a 45-minute fight about trading in an old mower to this. Okay?
Absolutely. That was, I think, the first article I ever stood up at town hall.
That's making progress. Okay.
So we're excited about that opportunity.
Could I ask a question
Certainly.
up on here on the screen? I guess fundamentally, can you just review for me, I think I understand them, but what's the criteria to present something? I guess this is not for you, John, but for the rest of the committee. What's the criteria for an item to be considered for capital needs?
Has a,
It's a dollar amount in a year useful life, right?
has a cost of $10,000 or greater, has a useful life of 5 years or more, and can be bonded.
Great, thank you. And so,
Dave,
John,
Is it 10 or 20? 'Cause
the
I've seen that in two different.
$11,000 you
I've
mentioned,
I
that
thought it
gets
was-
us the mower and
I've seen two
the
different
yearly
things.
maintenance? Or is
I
there
thought it was
enough
20.
cost for
I've
the
seen 10 a
mower?
couple.
No, I wish. That's simply, that's the annual cost moving forward. So the upfront, the purchase cost is $43,000. So it's
another one.
about,
So I'm
the
not-
mower itself is just about $30,000. And then there's a $13,000, that would include the first year of the service contract. And then the following year, we would build that into our operating budget if we were to, you know, move forward with this.
Okay, so let me correct something. The cost is $20,000 or greater. We have an old form that wasn't updated, so it's $20,000 or greater.
Thank you.
Unfortunately now, even an average commercial lawnmower is gonna exceed that $20,000 figure. The last mower we bought, which was a traditional commercial mower, I think was $17,000.
Okay. Lawnmower. And what is this from McGovern? There's another quote.
That's the trucks.
Okay, there's not a cover page for this?
Should be. Pages for- It may have come to the
Well,
back.
just go through it. We got the quote in front of us.
So again, we have a large fleet of you know, in total, DPW has, you know, over 50 pieces of equipment. And as part of our vehicle rotation plan, so this is a proposal or a request to replace a supervisor pickup, which would then be rolled into the fleet, and it would therefore replace it would repurpose that supervisor pickup to replace a 2003 service truck we have for in our fleet maintenance.
What's going on now with the difficulty in getting vehicles and,
It's extremely difficult to procure vehicles right now, particularly in the municipal sector, because we are able, you know, municipal bidding through the state contracting, we are able to purchase vehicles at a significantly less cost than an individual would pay off the lot. In some cases, it's as much as 18 to 26%, and so it's the sort of fleet purchasing, and that fleet purchasing is therefore through Ford or Chevy or Dodge or whomever, you know, you choose to purchase from. But obviously, when there's a shortage, as we're all aware, due to the supply chain of vehicles generally, and trucks and such are selling for above MSRP right now on the dealer lots, what's happened is Ford and Chevy and Dodge, they've all done this. They are essentially not honoring their contracts with municipalities or even vendors. I hate to say not honoring, but what they found are loopholes within those contracts that they, due to force majeure or whatever they want to call it, you know, the chip shortage and this and that, they are saying, you know, even a vendor who perhaps would put in an order for 500 Super Duty pickup trucks, when a town or state entity puts that even a purchase order in, it's simply an estimate. They won't guarantee even that the vehicle will be produced. So in most cases, we're now looking at an 18-month lag between when you actually place an estimated order and you'd actually see a vehicle arrive.
so the ones before us here, those aren't readily available? You'd have to put the...
Correct. So everything, to begin with, everything that we are proposing as far as vehicles, pickup trucks, dump trucks, all have to be ordered. They've always had to be ordered, but it used to be there was a 4 to 6 month window from the time you ordered till vehicle arrival. Now what's happening, we're like McGovern is one of the biggest suppliers for the state. They supply, you know, the state, all the state troopers' cars and things like that, M&A HQ. And so when you order it, they don't even know, sometimes they only have a 2 or 3 day window to put in orders. It's incredible. In 25 years of this, it's like nothing I've ever seen. I think we're all experiencing, you know, the impacts of supply chain shortages. But, so, again, so last year, you approved the purchase of, I think it was an F600 dump truck. We can't even order it yet. They won't even take our money. They won't even take the order. It's becoming very challenging, and so what we're trying to do, though, is still stay ahead of it. We were able to, through some relationships and some, you know, hard work and dealing with the same salesperson for, you know, the past 7 or 8 years, we were able to find the pickup truck, and thankfully, at the 2022 contract price, because from 2022 to 2023, we saw a price increase of nearly $17,000 in the base price of a F-250 pickup truck. So we purchased that 2022 pickup truck for $37,500. That, essentially, that same truck is $53,000 right now at state price.
And is there any other attachments to this? Is there gonna, plowing, sanding, or
Plows,
whatever?
yes, yep. So this proposed price includes plows, the radios, just the radio systems we have to put in these now are $3,000. Lighting upgrades, so that's inclusive of all, the whole cost. Snow plow now is about $8,200. Gone up from about $6,800 to $8,200. And one of the struggles we're having as well is that a lot of the upgraders, the upfitters, the individuals who put the dump truck bodies on or put the snow plows on or things like that, they won't even quote you a price until you have the truck, because their costs are escalating so quickly. So it's very, very challenging, and what's happening is the answer you're getting from vendors is, well, when it shows up, if it's more than we said it was gonna be, or you don't want it, well, it doesn't really matter, because there's 5 other guys who'll buy it. At whatever price we put it out there at.
So, how much was allocated last year for that dump truck? Do you remember?
I have it, right. We can look at the 2022.
So Melanie, what happens to that money?
So with every capital article, I send out, like during budget season, I send out all the open capital articles, and the departments give me the status of it. And as long as they still plan on using it for the purpose it was, granted for at town meeting, we carry it forward.
So you wait to bond it if we're gonna bond it? Or-
That one wasn't gonna be bonded, but yes, if it's something like the $11 million sewer project, we didn't bond that right away, we just have it authorized to bond when we need it.
Okay.
But even like the generator, that was a smaller one, we can even bond it in pieces, so that we're not pulling the whole thing if we just need the down payment or the planning or something.
Good.
So what we've been doing I think fairly successfully since 2007 actually, is working with the municipal lease-to-own property, which frees up. So essentially, at one point, we had money allocated in our operating budget for this, and, so we would go and we get capital approval, but we would lease to own with 3-year leases, and then we'd buy them at the end for $1. And that gave us some more flexibility as far as essentially managing a fleet. So recognizing that, capital committee has particularly free cash issues, when we're purchasing things through free cash, there's a limit to that. And so it would give some other options. And I think it worked well in the past. We're actually doing it still. We're doing it right now with the street sweeper. We've used that that's actually a 5-year lease to own that we're using that for, but several of the large dump trucks we did that with. The majority of the municipal fleet service pickup trucks and things, we did that with. Anything that's 2011 or newer, we procured that way. And so that took some of the burden off of, particularly when times were really tight in the town. We could try to keep our fleet maintained and upgraded, but we use that municipal leasing option.
So you might have mentioned this and I missed it. These 2 trucks you're looking for, are you retiring anything with that?
Yes, so this would retire a 2003, because what we do is, so we take the supervisor trucks and we roll those into the laborer fleet. And because
Yep.
the severe duty is a little bit less. And then, so they would roll in and it would replace a 2003.
But what about the other truck? It's just added?
Nope, that would replace a 2005. When we get them. You know, that's the thing.
Hey, John,
Yes,
in that program, the lease to own, does the lease come out of your operating budget, or does that still come out of the town?
in the past, we had line items for funding in our operating budget. We have that currently in the water department budget. We don't have it in the other budgets. We also use, for like a sweeper purchase, it's coming out of our Chapter 90 allocation, because we, again, didn't have free cash or the ability to bond that unit at the time. And, you know, we worked for 5 years to get the sweeper, finally get that, came up with a creative way to get, finance that and procure that. Thankfully, we have.
But the lease to own right now with the conditions is not a reality, right? You can still do that
Yes, I mean,
if you can get it?
if you can get it, right. I mean, so, and, you know, we could lease to own through capital as well. You know, it would be, because it's a one-time annual payment. And lease to own, as a practice, it goes back in East Bridgewater, back to 1992. It wasn't something I miraculously thought of. We actually leased a dump truck in 1992 for a 3-year period. And so it would just be a different funding mechanism at, you know, as part of your capital plan. So we could look at it in a number of different ways.
You guys got any questions? Go.
How many people do you have in the DPW?
Total, we have 25.
25?
Does that include facilities component?
Yes.
So there's 4 supervisors and 6 foremen?
Yep.
Then everyone else is office staff and then
No.
general
everyone's
labor?
Labor, yeah. 2 office staff.
Oh, is that 25?
Yep, 2.5 now.
He'll have extra hands when he has his robot. Is there a big, now, just like for the vehicles, there's a big wait. Is there a big wait for that, or are those available?
They're a little bit more available because there's an interest in getting them out to the market. So there's a little bit less lag time. We probably honestly wouldn't see it because of the way the funding, we wouldn't be able to order it until after July 1st because of, so it probably wouldn't be out on a field until, you know, September or October, I would anticipate, but
So now, any other questions? If not, we can move on to the roads.
yeah, this would have been nice if we could have done it on the screen.
How many trucks are you looking for, John? Back, there's 3, right?
2, right?
And actually, so of the 2, one
There's
is a new, an additional request because we weren't able to procure the F-600 last year. I have it in front of you again for approval, just to.
Okay, so there's 3.
No, it's the
There's-
same,
There's 250s and there's a 600.
no, there should be one F-250 and one F-600.
I get 11/15 date and,
No, 11/15 goes back to the one because we had to bring back, because in 11/15, we
12.
purchased that.
yeah, 12/13 I got a 250, 11/15 I got a 600, and 11/15 I got a 250.
11/15,
Yeah, I got 3.
Yeah,
What's
it's
the-
11, 15, 21.
21, going back a few years on here.
12, 13, 21.
Yeah.
12, 13, 21.
Yeah. On a single rail wheel pickup,
Yep, for 65,000.
38,000.
38.
Oh, so that goes back to, we brought that, you had already approved that vehicle in last year's capital plan.
Okay.
And we'd approved it for municipal leasing, but.
You don't
the
have
way-
it.
We do.
Oh, you
You
do?
were there,
Okay.
we talked about this. You brought it, but we brought it forward at the special town meeting, and we purchased it outright, rather than leasing it, so we purchased it with retained earnings from water revenue. That truck we have, that truck's in the fleet.
Okay.
That's that's the one I was referring to that we were able to get for $37,500. It's a 2022 that we're able to purchase under the 2022 contract. The ones that again, before you now are 2023, which will probably end up more being model year 2024s. But, so you had approved the F600 in the FY '23 budget, but we weren't able to order it, so I'm bringing it in
So
front of you
that,
again.
so that one is number 37, the one that we did it in the special.
The special.
That's the 22, okay.
It's not referenced. So in this list, however, John, the only things that are referenced are two vehicles, one which would be the swap dump truck for dump truck, and then the other one is the supervisor truck replacement, which would involve a repurposing within the department.
Correct. So we're looking for 2 new vehicles in FY
Gotcha.
'24.
Okay, now we've got the road plan.
Is that the water one?
Nope, it's the road one. 2023, proposed road repairs.
Okay.
Should have a spreadsheet that goes with that for what we're proposing. In totality, we're looking for $557,000, which is in line with kind of the general budgeting that we've done for the last several, now I think it was 8 years that we're going on with the road improvement plan. Again, we utilize that and we offset we are able to use Chapter 90 money as well, and it helps us move towards maintaining our roadways.
So, John, on this, it says funding source, and I can see Chapter 90, and I can see town funding, and then there's some with nothing.
That's just, anything in green is Chapter 90, anything in yellow is town funded. I don't know why those items didn't carry down through.
Or anything in monotone gray that,
Oh, so you
we
don't get it in
tell
color.
which is which.
I printed yours in color. Printed Dave's special package in color.
There you go.
I wanted to be like everybody else, and I brought this one. So,
So, again, we can go through them individually, the streets we have proposed.
I have a question on Pond Street. That's where we had the flood that went over the road.
Correct.
Is any drainage being done? It's just the mill and
So
overlay?
it doesn't have anything to do with the flooding doesn't have anything to do with the drainage.
Right, but did anything happen with that? Isn't there a little brook or some drains?
There's a culvert, that actually is in failure, and we actually are replacing that. We got a grant, through the state to replace that culvert, and we'll be doing that this summer.
Before we pave?
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
we're gonna pave up to the scope of the culvert. We'll
Okay.
replace the culvert section, and then we'll top it all.
Okay.
But so that's, what was that, 390?
312.
that was the olden days, we used to pave and then cut
Yeah.
through.
Yeah,
Still happens.
Oh, God.
it does happen.
Now, is our Chapter 90, we've accepted roads. Is our Chapter 90 funding increased?
No, our Chapter 90 funding's actually gone down. We've,
There's only 3 roads for Chapter 90 on this list. Is that true?
No, it's the whole top colored.
Pleasant Street, Thayer Ave, Mapfield, Pond Street,
Oh, okay.
the sweeper payment, some crack sealing, will all be funded through Chapter 90. The milling and paving of the remaining section of Cedar Street,
Is that Washington Street? Is this the last and final for Washington?
No, this will get us to beyond Oak Street. And then we'll still have, if we can make it work, it'll get us to the town line, the Whitman town line. But we've had to do that in phases, so, our hope is to get through the Oak Street intersection, and then what happens there, it widens out significantly.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
the square yardage is pretty big.
On Cedar Street, all that work that was done, was that the gas company?
Correct.
Okay. So I drive up there almost every day, and part of it's really nice. And the other part jiggles your kidneys. So, aren't they can't they help us out there? Shouldn't they be responsible for something?
Well, if the road was, it's kind of based on the condition of the roadway beforehand. So, you know, if it was a new road and the gas company came in and said, you know what, we've got to come in and we're gonna, you know, have to install a new gas main, and we can look at it and say, well, we've paved this road in the last 5 years, you know, we want funding for restoration. Cedar Street, that section hasn't been paved in 20-plus years. So you kind of have to, you look at the road beforehand, and you have to make that assessment. So you really can't hit them up to repave a road that needed to be repaved anyway.
I would.
So what we had done was we paved the first port, so they installed the first portion of gas main last year, 2 years ago now, and then we paved that section. They did the last section this year, and now we'll pave that section this year. So we're coming up behind them to make sure all the,
So,
just for that point. So again, you don't pave the road and they come back and,
and how do you determine, I know years ago, I'm gonna go back years, but what is the cycle to get through the roads in town? Do you have a plan that carries this much this year, that next year, and?
so in totality, we have about 1 million square yards of pavement. And we look to try to address them in one sense or another based on their pavement condition. Somewhere between 75,000, I'm sorry, just about 75,000 square yards a year. So that would get us, like every 12, 13 years, we're essentially getting to every piece of, you know, every square yard of the town has had some treatment. And as we get, it's just like I talk about to people, the way I look at it is, your dollars go a lot farther keeping your house painted than they do if you forego the painting and the clapboards and all of a sudden you're into rot and things like that. So as much preventative maintenance as we can do, those dollars go a lot farther. So, you know, to crack seal a road that's in decent shape, we're talking about $2 a square yard. To come in and have to grind up and redo a road, we're talking about $28 a square yard. So obviously crack sealing, the chip sealing, you'll see that we do a lot of around town. Chip sealing is about $7 a square yard, but we're getting about 7 to 8 years of additional usable service life out of that road. There's certain roads that have gone far beyond that preventative maintenance band, and we're into having to, you know, actually rebuild the base of the road and such.
So this has been in process for a couple of years. What percentage of roads have you been able to go through so far?
I would say we are just at about, I don't have a statistic, but if it was a guess, I'd say we're approaching, you know, 65% of our roadways. And, you know, from what you'll see on our plan is we're actually now able to move from the main roads, and we're addressing a lot of the side roads now. We're looking at, you know, roads like Stone Meadow Drive, Pinewood Path, Batty Ave, George Road. And so those are the roads we're looking to utilize our town funding on. And then what we do is the kind of the model is we use our Chapter 90 funding to work with the pavement preservation, because those dollars, we can stretch them farther.
John, in theory, the new practice that allows or will allow for the acceptance of various streets in town that have not historically been accepted should increase the Chapter 90 base, correct, or is that?
In theory?
Theory,
Yes.
yes.
What's happening, and this is a much bigger conversation, but, so as more and more towns, because every town in Massachusetts is in the same, trying to get more roads accepted. And we're all working to get our roads accepted. And we have gotten more roads accepted. So there's a formula of what that's based on. So your mileage, town, your total population, your community, and the number of employment jobs you have in your town.
Oh, didn't realize that.
Those are the three factors that go into it. And everyone's adding mileage, and their population of their town may or may not be fluctuating and increasing, and their, jobs that they're being created, it's all great. What's not happening, though, is there's still $200 million
In the kitty.
allocated for Chapter 90. That number has not changed. So that is why truly we had, 6 years ago, we were getting $378,000 a year in Chapter 90. We now get $372,000. We've added mileage. We've increased it. We'll be, in totality, we have about 90 miles of public way. Once we move through the process of accepting these roads like we did with the special legislation, we'll be up to having almost 81 miles of accepted way, which is excellent.
But that doesn't
But it's not
automatically
gonna,
get you.
it's not gonna,
Interesting.
and in theory, that's because the way it's supposed to work is you're supposed to start, after a road's been constructed and a subdivision is completed, in 2 years, from completion date, it gets accepted by the town. And you start to get, so say for every mile or whatnot, you get, $6,000. Well, if you get $6,000 every year for that section of roadway, when 10, 12 years from now, when it actually needs some preventative maintenance and, roadway preservation, well, it's worked because that money has contributed towards it. But if you go now and you accept a road that's 40 years old and has had no maintenance, you'll never catch up for what it's gonna cost you to maintain that roadway. There's other benefits to the town to accept these ways, so that's, again, I'm not advocating against not accepting these ways, but we're not accepting them for their Chapter 90 benefits.
Gotcha.
We're accepting them for the other
The new
reasons.
millionaire tax will help pay for everything, right?
Be interesting to see.
So the next thing I see coming up is capital infrastructure.
Skipped over one.
This is what I got, Public Works.
Your list is even different than the other. So do you want to discuss the,
This is like the same copy.
unfortunately, to show you the infrastructure plans and
I
stuff
know.
really isn't effective without the,
Pictures have a big impact.
yeah, without being able to put it up on the PowerPoint. So I think it's probably best for the sake of time just to look at the individual articles and their proposals. So from the infrastructure standpoint, that we'll look at the article that's requesting the well rehabilitation article. What I am proposing, what we're proposing, it's a little bit of a twist from the way we've done it in the past. In the past, we have come before capital or within our own operation and looked at repair and renovate, overhauling of individual wells every year. We'd say we're gonna overhaul and purge and overhaul, which is essentially clean and redevelop well number one, and we're gonna allocate $20,000 for that. And then we're gonna allocate, another $20,000 or $25,000 to renovate and redevelop well number three. And so we'd have two separate articles for that. What's happening in our system is our wells are aging. And to meet our demand that is now in the system, because we haven't built a new well since 1996. And there's obviously
But we made space for one, didn't we?
that's what we're working on, correct. We had an article last year, so we're working on a satellite well to well number 1. But what we're proposing now is an article that would allow us, because we need to redevelop all 5 wells every year. And what we'd like to do is have one article that we draw from to fund that, and we'll replenish it every year, rather than having so it would be so we're proposing $120,000. That would be to redevelop all 5 wells. Now, if it doesn't cost us $120,000, those funds would stay in there, and next year, we'll come back with a request for $80,000 to bring it back up to where we need to replenish 5 wells, because
This is coming out of the water
this,
department
yeah,
funding?
so this would come out of our retained earnings, but it would almost be an annual article to replenish the article. So we'd have one standing article for well redevelopment for all of our wells. And that way we could, because if one well comes in, one well maybe didn't need as much redevelopment, and we had some excess funds, but we needed more for another well, like our well number 5 on East Street is our worst well. It's our highest producing well when it's clean and redeveloped, but it's our heaviest iron and manganese, so it needs to be done every year.
So when you're saying redeveloped, it's really maintenance, cleaning it up?
Yeah, it's a term, so there's not to get into the specifics of it, but there's a cone of influence. Whenever you identify where your groundwater well is gonna go, there's a cone of influence, and that's the gravel packing that allows, that you pull the water through. And as the demand increases and the well ages and this and that, that cone becomes smaller and smaller, and more sediment, things get in there, and then more sediment gets into your actual well shaft and the pump, and particularly in our area, we have really high levels of iron and manganese, as we're all familiar with, and that all impacts. So the more water we're drawing, the more iron and manganese and sediment we're pulling into that shaft, and it creates and tuberculates in there. So what happens is you'll have a well that at peak capacity will pull 700 gallons a minute, but we can monitor and we can watch it, and now it will drop to 200 gallons a minute. So we are constantly in a state of managing and maintaining those wells, and you never get it back to 700. You might get it back to 650. And then, it drops down again to 200, and then you redevelop it, and you'll get 600 out of it. So these all have lifespans, and that's why now we have another article that we're looking at for an actual satellite well in the same well field, but it actually will be a new well that's driven and will supplement. In this case, it's well number 1, which is our oldest well, which was installed in 1964, when the town switched from being on the city of Brockton's water to having our own water system. And so that project that that's a 2-phase project, and so the way we looked at that project last year was, we said, we're gonna come forward and request funding for money to do the initial investigation, engineer it, this and that, and now we'll be coming back looking for funding to actually build that well out. But we won't probably need that, probably won't be looking for those dollars until a year from now, because it takes a year and a half to do all the engineering and the testing and get DEPs,
You were breaking it down each year, right?
correct.
This article is gonna be, every year is only for well maintenance on these 5, correct?
Correct, so rather than.
Can't use it anywhere else.
No, but what it does allow us is to use it on any of the 5
Correct,
wells.
correct, I understand
Rather
that.
than, in the past, we've had you could only use it on well number 1.
Correct, right.
If we
Okay.
needed to use it on number 3, we'd have to come
I don't
back.
wanna go buy a truck with it.
No,
That's
that's
what I'm
what it's,
saying.
right, it's for well, rehabilitation.
One thing that
Unless we need a
would-
truck to get to the well.
One thing John
can
and
take the
I are
lawnmower.
gonna have to look at is the water retained
Lawnmower
earnings
goes by itself.
and see what, because historically, you guys used about 500 to towards the operating budget, or towards the water operating budget, and I say he was certified only a little over 500
Yeah.
last year, so we'll have to take a
Well,
look at
and
it.
this leads into the conversation you had earlier. A number of our projects obviously are predicated upon, bonding, because that's how so we have a 15-year water infrastructure plan, which, actually, right now, we're lucky that, Lynn Lumberg is working on to update that long-range plan in the office. And, we'll be able to forecast out revenue projections with expenditures and things, and, that's how we justify rates and such. But, we have all of these drop into a plan of, how do we fund them? Just like all these other, so for anyone interested, the water department's a little bit, is a water enterprise system. So our revenues have to match our expenses, and our expenses have increased significantly, so obviously we need to start to look at our revenue projections long-term and things like that. Because these aren't options. Like, projects like this aren't really like, well, we'd like to do this. This has to be done, not only to meet the demands of residents who, otherwise we're gonna be in a situation where we have, like you're seeing some of these other communities, all-out water bans, things like that. Also, we have to comply with DEP regulations as well, and those requirements. So some of these things aren't really options whether or not we wanna do them. They're just perhaps a different way of looking at doing them.
Before we get to the next one here, what's with the water tank? We talked about this before, and I don't think we've done anything with rehabbing.
Yeah, we've not brought it before capital at this point. Mainly because we're looking at probably about $6 million to replace it.
Melanie, do we have that?
It's a loaded question.
We have internally, we have a plan in place of how we can move forward to address that. But right now, I'd say it's an internal plan. It's gonna be, we're looking at, the tank is functioning. The tank that we have is functioning. It gets sanitary, we have sanitary surveys done, we have inspections of it done, this and that, but it has some significant needs. The most significant need is that it needs to be painted if we were to maintain that tank. Problem being, when that tank was constructed, originally built in, again, 1964, when the whole water system for the town was kind of created, it was painted with lead paint, which is why it stood up so well. Now, obviously, lead paint, to remove it, the entire structure would have to be encapsulated, and all the lead paint removed, and the cost for that is about $4 million. So in reality, does it make any sense to paint a 64-year-old tank that, doesn't have the capacity probably that we really need it to have? Because in 1964, 1.5 million gallons of water a day, which is the tank's capacity, was 3 days of storage for the town. Now, in 2023, it doesn't, on a peak use day, it doesn't even meet the demand for one day. Our peak use can be 2.2 million gallons. So we really need to look at, and that doesn't mean we're gonna build a 6 million gallon tank. A lot of things have changed, and water quality management and things like that. But those are all things we're looking at, so.
Right, but if we build down on Bedford Street, those condos and everything like that, we're gonna have to increase our tank size.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. As the growth of the town grows, the infrastructure related to it needs to be expanded.
Okay.
And the next one is for rehabilitation, the same as the last one?
This is Harvard and Pine. Rockton's pump house.
So this is not actually Brockton's pump house. What this is there's a vault in the street. at the intersection of Harvard and Pine. So we've done this at the Brockton Town Line and Winter Street. We installed a new vault and a new meter. What we're proposing, so we have interconnects throughout all of our system. I think in total, we have 9 interconnects with different municipalities. We can provide them water, they can provide us water in situations of emergency or increased demand or whatnot. The meter and vault at the intersection of Harvard and Pine is, again, back to 1964, it's aged, it needs to be replaced in order to keep that interconnect in place. Those are obviously connections we don't want to lose. Those are vital in the event of significant drought, significant fire, any sort of emergency. So we're looking at that as a project that we're going to pursue.
Weren't they working there this past fall?
Yep,
At the same vault?
the same, yep,
Us or Brockton?
Brockton. So Brockton has an entirely different project that they've been working on all the way from Silver Lake
Okay.
to the, right into the city.
So this is right next to it,
This
basically?
essentially, so, if I'm not wrong here, Jason, what happened was when they were working on their system, they had to essentially isolate our meter off and cut it out. So we now need to upgrade the meter that's there and reinstall it back in, so we have that interconnect back in place.
They cut us out, we have to pay to fix it.
So it was our meter?
It's our meter.
It was our
Oh.
meter pit.
It's our
that went
benefit.
to them. They reconstructed all their,
Ah,
configured all
okay.
of their water valves so they could isolate different, on their different mains. And when they did that, they had to cut, but they also put a new valve in for us to hook on to.
Tap onto.
And
So the infrastructure's in place, but, you know, obviously, we didn't have the funding in our operating budget to do that.
Okay, what's next on the list?
Security.
The next items, I'm gonna ask Facilities Manager Brian Kaiser to come sit beside me. So I think, and what, again, what we want people to recognize, you know, our packet is very thick, and as I started this discussion this evening, it's because we partner with so many other departments and work with so many other departments to address their infrastructure and facilities needs and such. So, a number of these that you'll see come forward are brought forward by DPW and facilities, but they're, you
For
know,
the sake of
for the
others.
sake of, you know, our,
And plus, the packet's so big because you also include your 3- and 5-year plans. And we won't address those tonight. We will want to talk to departments about, you know, the 3 and 5 years, so we can get ahead of it, so we're not doing this again next year.
yeah, I would welcome that at some point.
We wanna
And we'll make sure we have the PowerPoint up for those.
Yeah, we just want, we want to resurrect that, so. Okay. You have the police.
The police security enhancement?
The bars.
Yeah, talking to Chief O'Brien, part of their regulation to certify the station is putting bars on the exterior windows.
On that first floor,
Yes.
going past
Yeah,
his
that-
office.
13 windows that need bars on them.
What about bollards in front of the door? Where cars don't drive through like we saw on TV a few months ago?
Doesn't meet the.
Possibility, that's not included in that request, but.
And if we block these windows, can they open them to get out? They can open them.
Anticipating putting the bars on the outside and painting them white so they don't look too intrusive.
But if they had a fire and they need to get out, they can't get out
Windows
these
not an
windows.
exit.
So they have plenty of fire escapes.
Exits, yes.
Regular egress.
The window's never an exit.
Okay.
So this doesn't really meet the requirement of $20,000 for capital.
Don't we change that figure?
No, no.
Add some bollards in there.
Put the bollards in.
There you go.
We'll add the bollards.
But again, that's what I want people to understand. these requests are made of us, and then we bring them forward to capital.
Right, I had a conversation with the chief about both of these. Maybe you do want to add the bollards to this and see what happens. It's only 15,000.
The bollards begin, and we've had, one of the reasons that bollards aren't included, bollards grow this significantly because we start to place bollards in front in the walkways. They're no longer ADA accessible, and now we're rebuilding walkways. So there's some growth that happens there when you,
Right, but if we keep them 6 feet apart, then the ADA can still get through,
not
right?
the width.
Yeah, walkway.
Feet apart, a vehicle can still-
But we don't have, it's not a 6-foot walkway.
Sure they can.
Yeah, what is the walkway to the front door?
The sidewalk right now, I think is 4 feet wide.
I mean, we could definitely add it and amend this.
I would look into that. You can ask the chief about bollards around the front of his place.
And if not bollards, some other type of barrier. Whether it be a continuation of the guardrail that we put up down there. Part of the building with that.
Okay, well, take a look at that. We'll see what happens, and we'll talk with the chief. We have the locker room renovations.
The locker rooms, and I did provide some pictures, I don't know if you guys have them. Were constructed when this building was built, when the addition went on in 91, for a department that was half the size. They're grossly inadequate, they're outdated. They don't meet any ADA compliance. The biggest issue we have in there is indoor air quality. There's no ventilation. And each officer should have a locker to put their own personal belongings in and their police belongings
And
in.
there's no ability to separate male and female officers, right?
Yes, there is. There are 2 separate locker rooms now,
Okay.
male and female. It's not just a locker room, it's also the restroom.
Didn't we address the air quality a few times? The different ventilation
In the ED
systems?
itself, yes,
Not
We've
in the
added-
locker?
not in the locker room. Not in the locker room. So part of that, the biggest expense in that is the HVAC part of it, is to take out the unit that's there. It doesn't provide any outside air, and change that unit so we can bring in fresh air and change the air in the area 3 or 4 times an hour. Because right now we're running a portable dehumidifier and fans, and it's just not conducive. There's 3 shower stalls down there, we're gonna take 2 out, so we have additional room for lockers, and put 1 ADA compliant shower stall in there. They actually need that for part of their regulation for certification for the station, to have a place to, an emergency shower to rinse off an officer that gets whatever on them. Right now, they don't have that capacity.
So this isn't meant to shower after your shift? or
No.
Before your shift?
No.
So we don't need a male and a female one?
No, they're already separated, so.
Okay. All right.
And who's doing this work? This isn't in-house, right?
Most of the demolition we'll do in-house. We'll do the locker installation.
So half and half?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. Next on the list is the library, is that what you have too?
Which one for the library? The roof?
Library one is the flooring replacement.
Flooring, I combined those 2, flooring for the community room. That's the original floor, from 1975. It's VCT tile. It's just old and worn, and, I can't really keep a finish on it.
These aren't asbestos tiles, are they?
They're not.
This is
And
the
I-
basement?
Yeah. And I combined that with, their back, out of the original building, their back old main electrical room. The exposed foundation, the original foundation is still exposed down there. It needs to be sealed up. It's a huge moisture problem in there, and water up through the ground. It'll take everything out of there and they can't use that space, and it's down in the children's section of the library, and it's affecting indoor air quality.
So floor replacement for 26.5, and then interior foundation waterproofing for 40?
Right, no, 16, they were combined.
Oh, okay. Alright, so we have some of the old paperwork too then.
So what does the total come out with, 2?
40,000.
So this is the top one now, okay. Can you tell me about that foundation waterproofing again? I didn't catch it all.
The original library dates back to 1898, 97. So it's rock foundation. And over the past 200 years, it's settled, cracked, moved, and water, groundwater seeps in through it. I can't seal out the outside of it, it's all below grade. I've got to seal up the inside of it.
It's too bad we didn't have the pictures for this one. These pictures look pretty interesting. And there's mold and stuff growing in there, right?
Yes. Anytime the committee would like to tour any of these facilities, I'd be happy to show you around. Just putting eyes on it is different than looking at a picture.
Oof. Should have put this in a binder. John, you get very detailed packages.
The roof, we did some patch
Shame we can't put it up on these
work
screens.
a few years ago.
I've been patching that roof for 8 years,
Okay, so this is gonna do the whole roof?
the flat roof.
The flat?
Um,
Wow.
Well, the other article here for the library roof slash HVAC upgrade is completely replace that flat roof, strip it down to the deck, and bring it up to code and insulate it, an entirely new roof. Selective repairs to the slate. Overall, the slate's in pretty good shape, considering it's original.
Yeah.
I can't find any documentation anywhere that it was ever replaced. It's in pretty good shape. I don't wanna have to rip it off. There's a few areas we're gonna have to patch, and that's fine. And then, there's a rooftop HVAC unit up there that only services the bottom section of that addition on the library, and it's original. It needs to be replaced. I'd like to replace it, upsize it, to air condition and heat that entire wing. Add some ductwork, so we're air conditioning upstairs and heating upstairs as well, not just the first floor. And it will be an energy efficiency unit with a sizable rebate on it. So overall, for the past year, almost a year, I've been dealing with the consultant and the architect, and that's how we've arrived at this $814,000 figure. To put that in a perspective a little bit, the HVAC unit itself, $210,000.
This was done through the study,
Brian.
the study that was funded, right?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I don't have the package in front of me, I'll pick it up when I'm back in town, but what's the tonnage on the HVAC unit?
The current one is 5, we're going up to an 8. 8 ton.
Thank you.
To save money on the paper with all these pictures and put the new roof on.
I emailed everything.
I know.
Gotta get you guys in the, next century, so you
Flooring
have your laptops
facilities.
with you.
Get next on your list.
Town hall break room.
Don't have that. Town hall break room.
Town hall break room was a request I received to create a break room / lunchroom for town hall employees, because currently there's no place for you to leave your office in this building and go have lunch. So the plan was to take the planning board room and divide it in half with a
A
wall.
conference room?
Yep. Divide it in half with a wall and make a kitchen / break room on one side of it. And then turn the other side of that into the building inspector's office. Currently, the building inspector works in an office that is literally 8 by 8, with no door. It's grossly inadequate. This would kind of give him a space. Once we put that wall up, that other space for him is done. Because he has access, he has a door, it has an HVAC system.
How would that impact the utilization of that conference room?
Is it much? Is it?
Good
I've
size
asked
table.
the
Yeah, I mean-
previous users, the planning board meets in here. And there's 2 other conference rooms in the building.
Was any thought ever given to putting a retractable wall in this room?
No.
Just to give extra conference room space if we needed it, because very seldom is it always full all the way back there. So, I'm just get concerned, because I remember sometimes you can't get a room. And, we should encourage people. Okay.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Is this all inside work?
Except for the plumbing, yeah, and the electrical, the rest of it we can pretty much do in-house.
Okay, next thing I have is facilities unforeseen mechanical deficiencies.
This is something John and I have discussed. Over the past 4 to 5 years, increasing cost of mechanical failures. And it's eating away at my budget. So if I had a funding mechanism to pull from, if I had, you know, a major circulator pump blow up on me, and I need 25 grand, I've got a place to go for it.
So Melanie, can I ask you a question? If capital is 20,000 or greater, and they allocate 45,000, a $5,000 piece of equipment goes, can he use that, part of that 45, or does it always have to meet the $20,000 threshold?
I think you could use it, because at that point, it's more of an article presented to town meeting, and articles can be, you know, they don't have to be capital articles, but he's bringing it to you guys as a capital article because of the nature of the repairs, but in essence, I think it would be more just a regular article brought to town meeting, for spending.
The intent behind this is similar to the well redevelopment. So this would be an article that, in a sense, would stay in, you know, if you had to use 30,000 of it this year for, you know, we would come back and look to have 30,000 replenished, so that it would have a, sort of have a standing balance in
So
it.
just like the roads, you're looking to have a little money every year for these failures.
Don't we have FinCom or capital have $100,000 emergency funding?
200.
Yeah, we have some.
And can we just use that if they come forward and say, hey, we need to pay for something?
Potential,
It would,
they can.
right.
Or we can increase my operating budget.
Because if you don't use it, then you give it back at the end of the year, correct?
And no, so that's why we're proposing these as articles, because these articles can stay open. So they don't go into an operating budget. It's not like we're going to FinCom and saying, listen, we want to raise your operating budget. And, you know, our thought process behind this was, if these were standalone articles that said they were used for this intent, that would be the intent of the article. It would have funding in it. So when these unforeseen significant mechanical things happen, you know, boiler issues, good, you know, you could go and draw from that, because I know, you know, obviously if you take this money and you just put it into an operating budget, it stays in there forever. So
If
the
you
intent
only
was not to
use-
try to do that.
You only used 15,000, that's all you would request after that.
Correct. So you'd come back next year and you'd look to replenish the article with $15,000. If we didn't have any unforeseen expenses, you'd have 45, you wouldn't be looking for any additional funding in FY '25, but essentially what you'd have is you'd have a funding source, which we don't have right now, to address these.
How does that sort of jive with, you know, the minimum requirements and, you know, dollar requirements and so forth, so.
And I'm not sure that it's a capital place. I don't know where you bring an article like this in front of. So
It
the
may
first
not
thought is
be
capital.
capital's position. You know, in the town meeting, we usually have an article that says we wanna fund the following capital projects, and it lists out everything. Something like this wouldn't necessarily belong in that article, but rather a standalone article. It's kinda almost like a stabilization fund, but not.
I mean, it's a revolving fund in essence, isn't it? I mean,
It wouldn't have a revenue source coming in.
well, that's true, yeah. Well, I mean, revenue.
Years ago, there was discussion of having a capital facilities fund for this sort of purpose. It never really, you know,
Facilities doesn't have a fund at all, except payroll?
no, it does, but it doesn't have anything that, can you identify, we talked about some of the examples of some
Some of the
things that,
examples that I wrote down for the past expenditures, the middle school univent hot water coil replacements. There's classroom univents. There's a big radiator coil in them. They explode all the time. That was $12,000 for a couple of them. Repairs to the pneumatic controls in the central school and the middle school, and the pneumatic controls control the HVAC system, was over 10 grand. Repairs to the auditorium AC in the middle school was 7,000. Repair and replace lighting at the high school auditorium was 14,500. Plumbing repairs in the middle school and the central school, that was corroded piping, supply lines and shut-offs, $26,000. Electric magnetic starters and compressor controls, 11,985.
but no, so there's nowhere in the facilities operating budget that there's a line item for any of these kind of expenses.
Where did that money come from?
That came out of my operating budget, but that meant I couldn't do something else. And last year, towards the end of the fiscal year, had no money in the school budget. Like, none.
We'll be removing money around with relief transfers it.
And we were transferring around to meet the bottom line.
Do you have a concern about going to FinCom, for each one of these? Is it more of like a timing issue?
Well,
I
I
would-
mean, yeah, in some sense, they're timing issues because it would almost be a request for, you'd have to make the request after the repair was already done.
Right.
So I guess that's kind of what it comes down to is, so these repairs that aren't budgeted, you know, there's no funding source, but you can't wait for the declaration of the emergency and then to go in front of FinCom to be determined whether or not you're gonna fix the plumbing repair at the middle school. Because these are things that will, if they weren't addressed, they would shut the buildings down.
But can't you automatically just fix something that breaks and then come and ask for
Not
the
if you
bill
don't
to be
have-
paid?
not if I don't have a funding
Because
mechanism.
you don't have any guarantee that it's actually.
I know, but
gonna
if we
pay.
put money up, it's kind of giving you guys a free checkbook to just go and buy and fix something instead of coming and asking the people.
I kind
Kind-
of take
you know what I
offense at
mean?
that,
Well,
to
yeah,
be
but
honest with you. Like, it's not a
it's a-
free checkbook. These are repairs.
No, I understand
I
that.
mean, we could come forward in our operating budget and say, we need to have, you know, this much money in there so that these are done. Because you're actually like, well, it takes how long to post a finance committee meeting, and then you gotta get the finance committee, and, you know, I've not seen, they've always been receptive, but again, like, are you gonna wait to make the repairs? Or do we have are we authorized, we'll make the repairs in finance committee, we'll pay the bill? We have that, and you're the capital committee, you don't speak for finance committee, but.
No, right.
See, these unforeseen expenditures, if I put them in the operating budget, or try to carry that figure, I'll way exceed my cap that I'm supposed to stay under for my budget. Every year, it's whatever,
Yeah,
2,
I mean-
3%.
Well,
I'd
plus
be
on
at
the other
15%
side,
over.
if you don't spend it, it goes back into free cash. We have to allocate it all again the next year.
And that was the thought process behind establishing an article.
Just
And
add
again-
one amount.
I'm not sure that capital is the place that it starts, but it's the only place that we have to start.
I'd say
So
for the
maybe it's a-
operating budget too, operating versus the articles, the article, when things getting paid out of an article is just subject to a little more scrutiny when it comes into my, like, comes from John's office into my office. Anything paid from an article is held to what the article is for rather than,
Because there's criteria built into
Right.
the
Right.
actual
It,
article.
it has to meet the specific criteria of that article, or
So,
the
depending
town
on how
account
it's
is not gonna pay
so
it.
if we, yeah, if we saw just WB Mason supplies coming through an article that was supposed to be for mechanical failures, then that's not gonna go through.
All right, well, we'll talk to the, I got a finance committee meeting Monday, I believe, Monday or Tuesday. I can bring this up.
We'll
and
be
have a
there.
Discussion with them. Oh, yeah, that's right.
We got even a bigger package.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that one?
No,
And Brian, just for sake of understanding, this list that you've given, I mean, you've got, what, 6 items on here, is that over 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? I mean, what's-
The past couple of years.
Past couple of
And I just pulled out some quick ones that like,
they're regular occurrences,
I
basically.
mean,
well,
fair to say.
they aren't. If they were regular occurrences,
Well,
I
in
could.
the sense
try
that
to
something's
absorb them
always
in the
breaking
operational
down, that's
budget.
what I'm
right.
saying.
I mean, we look at our
Anticipate it,
operational
but
budgets
Seems
as,
to be happening that
I
way.
think, townwide, everyone looks at their operational budgets, you're operating, your preventative maintenance, your things that can be scheduled, your things that can be projected. None of these issues that we're talking about are anything that you would project. It's like, you know, when the radiator hose blows on your car, you weren't anticipating that expense. So when you know, you might know, and again, I always bring it back to what people can understand. Well, you can know that your tires are wearing and that next year you're gonna need to replace the tires on your car. Well, that's similar to like a capital expense. You know, we're projecting that, we're seeing a plan for that, and we can think about that. But if a tire blows out on you on the side of the road, you may not have that, that's not something that you may have had a fund sitting
Right, I mean, it's
aside for.
somewhat the same thing as with your vehicle plan. I mean,
Exactly.
that you've got the 2013, whatever it is, that you think you've got 3 to 5 more useful years of life on it, and all of a sudden, kaboom, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
You know. So this was just another way to identify, how do we fund these unforeseens?
Emergency,
Yeah, and,
so it's
You
an
know-
emergency funding source for things that break.
yeah, and I guess it comes up to, you know, everyone's definition of an emergency is gonna be different. I mean, but a plumbing leak, you know, when a plumbing pipe goes inside a wall at the central school,
Right, you
you
know,
really don't have an option of whether or not, you know, it's not like you're just gonna isolate the valve and shut off.
so it
the-
can be used for things other than routine maintenance.
And that's essentially, I think, even unforeseen facilities-related mechanical issues is how we, you know, how we describe the description of the request.
Not day-to-day operational.
But again, I would perhaps agree that the capital committee is not, because it's an article specific to,
So we should
but
probably
it's a
have-
place to start the conversation.
We should probably bring this up at the FinCom meeting, so they can discuss it. It's not a bad idea, I understand if stuff happens, but I also understand the emergency component. So we can, we'll discuss it there. Because you're right, it has to be taken care of. An emergency is an emergency. I've been in that that place before.
And you can't budget for every unforeseen in your general operational budget.
I don't think we should be budgeting. That's part of
You
it,
can't,
that's
because
part
the
of this.
budget would be astronomical.
If we had to budget for every potential unforeseen,
Well, if you did that and you had money left at the town meeting, you could move it to another line, and that's the free checkbook at that point.
right, and then, so the intent here wasn't to come forward and to finance committee and say, we want to increase the operational budget $45,000 for these potential unforeseens. It was actually, as Melanie said, to structure an article that had some, you know, parameters around it that would be a standalone article for this use and could be replenished on a regular basis if, as needed, or an annual basis as needed.
Did you guys ask, Charlie on this from what other towns that he's worked for that might have done this?
We submitted everything through Charlie's office.
Okay.
We didn't have specific conversation about any of the capital projects to this point.
So one more?
Yeah, one more, Central School feasibility study.
Yes.
That's separate with the schools.
You may be aware that we have been accepted into the MSBA's eligibility period for a feasibility study. Notified that in late December. So part of that means we need to come up with funding for a feasibility study.
At the
Given
Central
some,
School,
I was
just-
given some information from MSBA, and that's how I arrived at that 1.3. They provided some information from other school districts and other towns that have done projects similar size, elementary schools, feasibility studies, and we took an average out of that, and that's where we sit.
So,
It may be less, it may be more, but
how about if we define feasibility study so people will understand what that is?
And some of this conversation may be better to have with the actual school department, because we can have a definition of what we think the feasibility study is, but it's a little more encompassing than what you would think from a facility standpoint.
from my dealings with MSBA, it's my understanding that a feasibility study will look at your existing structure, your current enrollment, future enrollment, your needs, and what you want to see as a vision as 21st century education for elementary kids. That building right now was constructed in 1951, the addition went on in 61, and the modular units were
2006.
2006. Feasibility study will look at all of it. Is it worth rehabbing that building and putting an addition on it and getting rid of the mods? Is it more feasible to build something else? Is it feasible to relocate their kids during a construction process? All that is part of the feasibility study and how much it costs. You get that study done, you bring it before the town and the school department, and they decide what they want to do. MSBA will give their recommendations. They know, they've already given us money for the building, past 2 projects. We're looking at right now, a 57.25% reimbursement rate is what we just got on the roof. We're expecting our final payment on that next month. So that project will be closed out.
But we had the feasibility study one time before, and that's why we did the boiler, we did the roof, because they said we had good bones.
Feasibility just for the boiler room, not the
Right.
entire building.
Okay.
Feasibility for the roof, not the entire building.
And again, this is why I said I think this is a bigger conversation the school department should be involved in, because feasibility has as much to do with what is considered providing for that 21st century educational experience as it does with the physical structure of the building. And that is a lot more than we do in DPW.
So we're tabling this for.
Well, I would imagine,
With a
I would
meeting with
imagine
them.
that when you meet with
Yeah.
them, that
Is
the capital
Charlie here?
request is actually.
Yeah, I'm
coming
still
out.
here. I mean, I don't expect, as much as Brian has put this forth with John, I'm not sure that you're gonna be making a decision about this in May, simply because there are months of work before the prep for the feasibility study.
I mean, Charlie, isn't the letter of December 21st, isn't that essentially saying that you're in a pre-feasibility study approval, and then you yet have another step that has to be
Right.
taken?
There's 5 steps that we have
Yeah.
to go through. I'm putting this forward now because I wanted it on the radar.
Yeah,
Okay,
And-
okay, that's fair enough.
Like Charlie was saying, it's not gonna probably be on the spring, maybe a special in the fall. But on your radar for that amount of money.
don't be surprised, is what you're trying.
Yeah.
Right.
What was this about? I didn't know.
Either way,
how
something
much?
needs to be done with that school,
3 million.
whether it's through MSBA or through the town. We gotta do something with that building.
Well, with the passage of the last, one of the articles in the election, that money was gonna be used for schools and roads, right? So we're gonna see more chapter 90
Gonna wait
money,
to
or
see
we're gonna
it.
see more money for the school, right?
Well, in fact, you are seeing more money for under chapter 70. There's, we're not seeing the same percentage increase that a lot of other communities did, but we got a heavy increase this past year, the year from 22 to 23. But the governor's budget came out, at least for the cherry sheets, came out today, and there's chapter 70 for East Bridgewater is up 5%.
We already decided we're not getting any more chapter 90 money, so forget about that.
Well, that'll be settled a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, for the millionaire's tax, half of it, let's say, is going to education, but that's also colleges, universities, community colleges and such. They're also gonna probably be, just like ARPA, where they put money into various pots outside of ARPA, so there's a transportation pot. It's not just money going to cities and towns. They put in various pots for broadband, whatever else. Same thing's gonna happen with the millionaire's tax. I'm sure money is going particularly to special education programs, for instance, not a pure chapter 70, just here's your money. So I'm sure some of the money that we saw today that's in the governor's budget is from the millionaire's tax, and that's why you see a 5% increase.
So you can feel good when you pay that extra money under the millionaire's tax.
I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about it, trust me.
And don't forget that the MBTA is considered transportation. So when you start talking about where dollars may go.
And the governor uses that a lot, so. Boy. All right, John, so what I would ask is, we'll talk about this and we'll go through the process with everybody, is that you just kind of prioritize these? Like what's more critical than others
But I believe they are prioritized in the
in
3
that
and
order,
5
the
year.
order that we have here?
Well, I didn't put this sheet together, so I'm gonna take this.
Will you be able to mark that sheet up for us?
Yeah,
And
I
then,
didn't put this, so so in the capital.
That's my copy.
And I'll give it back. I'll take a
also,
snapshot.
Dave,
I
on,
prioritized mine.
on,
Yeah, we,
on the school stuff on the bottom, when we meet them, can we have, request Brian to be here?
Oh,
A
yeah,
lot of
he's
this stuff
usually here.
is fields and
When are
stuff.
When are they scheduled?
I'm not
We
sure.
haven't scheduled it yet, because it's our first meeting. We just got all the capital packages. That's what I wanted to, after this, we'll schedule it. Is there any night that's bad for you?
I'll make it work.
We gotta try to stay away from Thursdays, because that's the night they have their school committee, right? Is it Thursday?
Tuesday, I thought.
Tuesday?
There's a member right there we can ask.
Gordon,
yeah, Tuesdays is
Gordon,
Yes, right here,
what night is the school committee, Tuesday or Thursday?
Tuesday.
Okay, all right. So, maybe we'll start, Wednesdays, good for folks? Okay. All right.
So
And,
in our 3 to 5 year capital
Yeah, we'd
plans,
like to
everything is prioritized. So that's how the plans are presented.
I think that's part of this.
Correct, you have that in your package. But we have those for, again, for the water infrastructure, the roads, vehicles, equipment.
So this is hard to read.
And it's not color
I have
coded.
to jump off. I have another meeting, I apologize, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
so what I have these on email. I will send them out to you so they're easier for you to read. I'll send them out prior to the meetings,
Okay.
so. And then at some point, once we get through with this year, we will want to start to look at the future.
And that's what, I mean, we really do need to do that, because obviously, Public Works encompasses a lot, and there's a lot of, we need to, so we don't end up at a critical point of numerous things needing to be replaced, all at once, and, that's part of the,
Well, the roads are a good example. There were many, many years that they weren't maintained.
correct.
And they used to come into the selectman's office and complain all the time, and it was a mess. And we started the program, and it has gotten a lot better. And we had the same situation with the high school, that we didn't maintain that, et cetera, and then, we had to build a new high school. So these are things we have to consider, but we also have to consider the resources we have to handle them. Nothing on John's list is part of ARPA, right?
No.
DP, we didn't submit any projects as part of that.
But the school committee has some things for ARPA, right?
Yeah, more than half their list?
Okay, so that's one thing we'll have to cover too, when we sit with them. We'll have to find out from them when they can meet.
I think there are a few opera projects that were proposed by others that DPW would probably end up managing.
Right. I know about a few.
It's a good project, but, we'd utilize our contracts and things, I think, for some of those.
Which one? It's a good project.
Well, I haven't actually seen the end-all list, but the sidewalk on Union Street, I think, was proposed by the at-large, from what I understand.
And there's the stuff down in the field. So, good. Okay. Any more questions for John?
Nope.
Okay, so if everybody thinks Wednesday nights are okay, I can start, check with the schools and the fire and all that, and line up those meetings.
Yes.
So, with that, I would entertain a motion unless anybody has something else.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.